There is beneath all our cleverness a quiet faculty that no machine can mimic. It is the art of listening to what is not being said. When you step into a room, something stirs long before language begins. You can sense who holds the center of gravity, who hides behind a polite expression, who aches to be seen without daring to say so. This is not analysis. It is awareness, older than the mind itself. It is the body knowing before the mind interferes. Modern life teaches us to speak quickly, to think sharply, to fill every silence with words. But the more noise we make, the more we lose the subtle music underneath it all. Social intelligence is not the power to persuade or impress. It is the quiet attunement to the living current flowing between human beings. When you move from this stillness, others do not merely hear you, they resonate with you. For connection is not made through speech, but through the shared silence beneath it. Most of what passes between human beings is never spoken. The real conversation happens in the pauses, in the soft currents that flow beneath the surface of words. Think of a moment when someone said, "I'm fine," but you felt they weren't. No evidence, no argument, just a quiet knowing in your chest. Or the way a friend's silence felt heavier than any explanation could be. This is where social intelligence lives. Not in clever speeches, but in the spaces between them. We've built a culture that worships language. The louder, the sharper, the better. We teach people to talk, but seldom to listen. And when silence arrives, most grow restless, as though something essential has gone missing. But silence isn't absence. Silence is the ground from which real connection grows. Words are like ripples on water. They reveal movement, but the depth is felt below. When you learn to sense beneath words, you begin to hear the tremor behind a laugh, the hesitation before a yes, the small griefs tucked inside ordinary sentences. To be socially intelligent is to allow yourself to feel these undercurrents without rushing to fix or explain them. It's to be present enough for another person to exhale, not because you solved their problem, but because they finally felt understood. Real connection doesn't happen in speeches. It happens in the quiet recognition that two human beings are breathing the same moment. To move with grace among others, one must first learn the quiet art of knowing oneself. Social intelligence is not a mask you wear to impress. It begins with the stillness within you, the inner compass. When you are at odds with your own emotions, everything outside becomes distorted. A simple look may feel like judgment, a silence like rejection. But when you begin to understand your own tides, anger, fear, longing, joy, you no longer drown in them, you float. And from that calm water, it becomes possible to see others clearly. Emotional intelligence is that inner compass. It's the ability to feel a storm inside without being swept away. But a compass alone is not enough. A sailor who never looks outward will lose the shore. Social intelligence is the map, the ability to navigate the subtle landscapes of other hearts. Every person carries their own weather. Some arrive like sunlight, others like quiet rain. When your inner compass is steady, you can sense their changing skies without confusing them for your own. You begin to notice the tremor in someone's breath, the way their words don't always match their eyes. And rather than reacting, you respond. This is the balance, to know where you stand within and to walk gently in the world without. One keeps you anchored, the other lets you travel far. To read another person is not to pry into them, nor to decode them like a puzzle. It is to stand quietly at the edge of their being, and allow yourself to feel the ripples they make in the world. Most people imagine communication as something that happens through words, but the body speaks long before the mouth does. The slight tightening around the eyes, the way someone inhales before answering, the small delay before a smile, all these are little doorways into the unspoken. And you don't need special training to notice them. You only need to stop rushing past what is already there. We live in an age that values quick answers, fast replies, and clever remarks. But the art of reading people belongs to a slower rhythm. It happens when you allow your mind to quiet, your eyes to soften, your presence to stretch beyond your own thoughts. And in that stillness, something extraordinary occurs. People begin to reveal themselves, not because you force them to, but because they feel seen. They feel you're listening. To read people is not to control or manipulate. It's to listen with the whole of your being. To notice when a voice trembles, but the words remain strong. To sense when a silence is tender and when it is full of pain. You don't interpret them, you meet them. The moment you truly see another person, not through the fog of your own judgments, but through quiet attention, something shifts in the air between you. It's almost invisible, like the faint change in temperature before rain. This is where trust begins, not in grand gestures or elaborate promises, but in the simple human recognition. I am being felt. I am not alone in here. People don't trust because of what you say. They trust because, for a brief moment, they sense that their inner world has been noticed without being handled. It is the rare experience of being understood without being interrupted. This kind of presence is not decoration, it's foundation. When someone feels seen at this level, defenses soften. The walls they spent years building loosen, even just a little. And from that quiet opening, trust begins to take root. Not as an agreement, but as a shared silence between two human beings. Trust is a strange thing. You cannot demand it, you cannot force it, and you cannot bargain for it. It grows the way dawn arrives, slowly, without announcement. Real influence does not belong to the loudest voice in the room, but to the presence that others feel is steady. You've seen it before. Someone speaks softly, and yet the room listens. Not because their words are dazzling, but because people can sense something beneath them. A quiet ground, a sincerity that asks for nothing. Social intelligence isn't about persuading people to bend to your will. It is the art of becoming someone others feel safe to open their world to. Trust is built not through clever arguments, but through the simple consistency of presence. When you truly listen, not to reply, not to prove, but simply to be there, people recognize it immediately. It touches something older than logic. It says, I see you. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to be with you. And from that trust, influence flows on its own, not as pressure, but as gravity, gentle, invisible, effortless. A tree does not convince you of its shade. You simply walk toward it because it stands where it has always stood. So it is with trust. Influence is not the storm. It is the still air that gathers people without a word. Long before we learn to speak, we learn to feel one another. Long before we built cities and systems, we gathered around firelight, reading the flicker in someone's eyes more easily than the words that came after. Connection is not a modern skill. It is the oldest language we share. the rhythm of another's breath, the tremor in their voice, the heaviness or lightness of their silence. Your body knows how to read this. It always has. It is not something you learn so much as something you remember. Modern life often makes us forget. We build walls of analysis, of speed, of distraction. But beneath it all, your nervous system is still listening, still tuning itself to the quiet music between people. When someone is in pain, a part of you aches. When someone laughs, something in you softens. This isn't sentimentality, it is the design of being human. We are wired to connect the way trees lean toward light. And when you allow yourself to trust that instinct, to sense before you speak, to feel before you explain, your interactions become less about control and more about attunement. In that space, conversation turns into something older than language. Two beings remembering they were never truly separate. We live in an age where noise has become the default setting. Not just the restless noise of the world, but the chatter inside the mind that never seems to rest. Everyone is speaking. Few are listening. And in that endless exchange of words, presence is lost. Presence isn't a performance. It isn't about perfect posture, nodding at the right time or pretending to be calm. It's the art of being here fully, without rehearsing what comes next. You've felt it before. When someone looks at you, not past you. When their attention doesn't wander. When you feel in the marrow of your being that in this moment you don't have to explain yourself. Their silence is not empty, it is spacious. In a world so addicted to distraction, presence has become rare and therefore powerful. It slows the rhythm of conversation. It turns noise into music. It allows the small, quiet truths in people to rise to the surface without being drowned out. Machines may outthink us, but they cannot be with us. They cannot offer the kind of stillness that makes another human exhale. Presence is not something you build. It's something you stop covering up. And when you offer that kind of space to others, they recognize it immediately. Not with their intellect, but with their soul. What binds us most deeply is rarely spoken. The most honest conversations are carried in the eyes, in the tilt of the head, in the rhythm of a breath shared between two people who need not explain themselves. Empathy isn't a technique. It is the simple act of standing beside another human being without rushing to correct or repair their experience. It is the art of feeling with, not fixing for. When someone is grieving, words often fall short, but a steady hand, a soft gaze, or a quiet presence can speak with a language older than speech itself. We often imagine that influence comes from great speeches or brilliant arguments, yet more often it comes from the silent way we meet another person's heart. To be empathetic is not to drown in another's feeling, it is to let your presence become wide enough to hold it gently, as a river holds the reflection of the moon, without grasping, without claiming, without needing to change it. But empathy without ground becomes a flood. If you lean too far into another's storm, you may lose your footing. And when that happens, compassion turns to confusion, listening turns to reaction. This is where many people falter, not because they don't care, but because they haven't yet learned to stand firm in the winds they invite. To offer true presence is not to carry someone else's pain as your own. It is to hold space for it without becoming it, like a tree that bends but does not break. And it is in these moments, when emotions grow heavy, that the quiet art of emotional mastery begins, not as control, but as a return to center. From empathy, we step gently into strength. Conflict in itself is not the enemy. It is simply a moment when two worlds meet and neither wishes to disappear. Most people treat conflict as a battlefield, rushing to defend their position, to prove themselves right. But the wise approach it as a mirror. What unsettles us in another often touches something unsteady within ourselves. When anger rises, when pride stiffens the spine, when the voice grows sharp, that is not the moment to conquer the other. It is the moment to return to stillness. Emotional mastery does not mean suppressing feeling. It means meeting it like an old friend who has come to deliver a message. If you can remain steady, when your chest tightens, when your breath grows shallow, you will find that conflict loses its teeth. Your stillness becomes the calm center around which the storm turns. And from this place, listening returns. The other person no longer feels they are fighting against you, but being heard by you. And when listening enters a room, truth becomes possible again. To master emotion is not to harden against life. It is to stand in its waves without losing your balance. When one of you remains anchored, the quarrel slowly remembers its humanity, and what began as tension becomes an opening. What follows is not victory or defeat, but quiet. The air between you no longer strains under the weight of opposing wills. It loosens. A calm begins to shape itself in the space where resistance once lived. This is the quiet strength that does not need to announce itself. When you remain steady in the storm, you become something people lean toward without quite knowing why. It isn't about being wiser or stronger. It's about not leaving yourself. Others may raise their voices, their defenses, their fears, but your stillness does not mirror their storm, like the riverbank beside a rushing current. You give shape to the moment without trying to control the water. In that kind of presence, something in the other person begins to settle too. People rarely remember arguments in detail, but they remember how they felt when they stood near someone who did not fight them back. Safety is not a speech. It's a felt thing, quiet, wordless, and unmistakable. To become a safe space is not to fix others. It is simply to be a place where their walls can rest, where their breath can drop a little lower into the body. And when you carry that steadiness into the world, you stop trying to win people over. They come closer on their own. True social intelligence is not a set of tricks or polished performances. It is not how well you speak, how charming you sound, or how quickly you think. It is the quiet art of being so fully yourself that others feel free to be themselves too. All the techniques, reading people, building trust, mastering emotion, they are only different doors that lead back to the same place, presence. The presence that listens more than it explains, the presence that steadies rather than reacts, the presence that does not need to win to be strong. When people leave your company, they will not replay your perfect sentences. They will remember how they felt around you, whether they could breathe a little easier, whether they felt seen, whether they felt safe. And that is the real power here, not to shine above others, but to become a space where they no longer need to defend themselves. Social intelligence is not learned in books alone. It is remembered in the silence between words, in the calm between storms, in the stillness you carry inside. When you embody that, you no longer need to try to connect. Connection happens on its own.